My husband tried to kill me, so I faked my death and disappeared for 3 years. Before I start telling my story, tell me where you're watching this video from. Let's go. My name is Sophia and I'm alive, although for 3 years the world believed I was dead. It all started so ordinarily that it's almost impossible to believe how we got here. I met Raphael at a friend's party at the end of 2015. He was everything a 25-year-old woman could want: successful, charming, attentive. He worked as a lawyer at a prestigious firm, had a smile that made my heart race, and that confidence of someone who always got everything in life. In the beginning, it was perfect. Flowers at my workplace for no apparent reason. Dinners at sophisticated restaurants where he seemed to know the maître personally. Weekend trips to small towns. He would tell me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, that he was lucky to have found me. My best friend, Carla, joked that he was a dream come true. My parents loved him. His family welcomed me as if I'd always been part of that circle. We got married 2 years later. I wore a wedding dress that cost more than my 6-month salary, at a ceremony with 200 guests in an event hall in the best neighborhood in the city. Everything was white, delicate, perfect. In the photos, I looked like a princess. Raphael looked like a prince. When Marina was born, something changed. It wasn't gradual or obvious at first. It was more like watching a cloud's shadow pass over the sun. Raphael started caring about where I was all the time, who I was talking to, what I was spending, even on diapers and baby formula. Married couples share everything. He'd say when I suggested maybe we needed separate bank accounts, "Don't you trust me?" That simple question carried so much weight that I'd give in. I always gave in. I closed my personal bank account. I started depending on him for any money I needed. When I questioned it, Raphael would kiss my forehead and tell me it was for my protection, that he wanted to take care of me and Marina. I was so busy with motherhood, so exhausted from sleepless nights and feedings that I couldn't think straight. I convinced myself he was right. Protective husbands exist. This was love, wasn't it? My mother was the first to notice something strange. She came to stay with us for a week when Marina was 3 months old. One afternoon, Raphael grabbed my phone while I was changing the baby's diaper and started reading my messages. My mother was making tea in the kitchen, but she saw everything. Later, she pulled me into the bedroom. "Sophia, this isn't normal," she said, gripping my arm firmly. "A husband doesn't check his wife's phone like that. He's just being careful," I defended, but the words came out weak. "He wants to make sure I'm not missing important calls." My mother looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. It was pity mixed with worry. "When you need help, call me. Promise." I promised, but I didn't believe I'd need to. My mother was exaggerating. Raphael was an attentive man who cared about me. Why couldn't I see the difference? When Victor was born 2 years later, the situation got worse. Now I had 2 small children and Raphael supervised every aspect of my life. I couldn't visit friends' houses without telling him first. I couldn't spend money at the supermarket without accounting for it. I couldn't even mention to my friends how I was feeling, because Raphael said that speaking badly of your husband was disloyalty. Carla tried to talk to me one night. "Sophia, you've disappeared. I haven't seen you in months," she said during a quick call that Raphael couldn't hear. "Are you okay?" "I'm great," I lied. "Just busy with the kids." But I wasn't great. I was increasingly isolated. Raphael had convinced me to quit my job, saying the children needed me at home full-time, that I'd be a better mother that way, that he earned enough for all of us. Without my own income, without professional contacts, trapped within 4 walls, I was completely dependent on him. The isolation was as subtle as a rope tightening slowly. One day, Raphael suggested it would be better if I didn't spend time with Carla because she didn't understand what it meant to be a family woman. Another day, he explained that my mother had always been a negative influence in my life. Gradually, I cut contact with practically everyone I knew. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was like each friendship slowly evaporated until only Raphael remained. And then came the physical violence. The first time was so unexpected that I almost didn't recognize what had happened. We were arguing about something trivial. I think it was about how much I'd spent on clothes for the children. He was getting increasingly angry, speaking louder, invading my personal space. "You're irresponsible," he'd yell. "A selfish mother who thinks about nothing but herself." I was backing away, apologizing, trying to calm the situation the way I'd learned to do. But nothing worked. He lunged toward me and pushed me against the kitchen wall. My head hit the wooden cabinet. For a second, everything went white. Then there would be pain. "Look what you make me do," he said, breathing heavily. "You provoke me." I was confused, in pain, scared. But mostly I was confused. My husband, the man who told me he loved me, had pushed me, had hit my head. I'm sorry, I whispered, even though I didn't know exactly what for. I won't do it again. He left the kitchen. Later, when the children were asleep, he came to find me in the bedroom. He apologized profusely, said he was under stress at work, that it wasn't his nature to do that he loved me more than life, that it would never happen again. I believed him because I needed to believe him. Because the alternative, that the man I'd had 2 daughters with was an abuser, was unbearable. But it happened again. And again. A slap in the face when I called him a liar. A push so hard I fell to the floor when I questioned him about missing money. Each incident was followed by apologies, promises, his tears, but rarely mine, because I'd already learned not to cry. I told my family doctor about it during a checkup, and he suggested I seek psychological help. Sometimes women like you, he said in a tone I can't quite describe but that made me feel dirty, need to learn to communicate better with their husbands. Women like me. As if there was something wrong with me. My mother found out when she visited my house and saw a bruise on my arm that I couldn't hide well. She panicked completely, but Raphael was there, all sympathy and concern. He explained that I'd had a bicycle accident. My mother didn't believe it, but what could she do? I denied everything in front of her, and Raphael offered such a convincing alternative version that she left my house worse than when she arrived, because now she was certain something was wrong, but couldn't prove it. I started secretly planning to leave. I opened a bank account at a different bank, using the address of a post office branch. I transferred small amounts, 20 reais here, 50 there, amounts so insignificant that Raphael would never notice. I kept important documents in a backpack that I hid at the bottom of my closet, under boxes of winter clothes I didn't wear. I called a helpline for women victims of domestic violence. The woman who answered was kind but direct. You need an escape plan. And you need to be willing to leave everything behind if necessary. My heart raced. Leave everything? Leave my children? If you try a traditional legal process with an abuser, she explained, he has resources you don't have. Lawyers. Money. Influence. And he'll probably get custody because he's spent months, maybe years, building a narrative that you're unstable. Judges hear these stories all the time. That conversation left me paralyzed with fear, but it also planted a seed of hope. There was a way. It wasn't a good way, but there was a way. Everything came to a head one night 3 years ago. Raphael had gone out for drinks with clients and came home around midnight, quite drunk. He found me in the living room reading a book, an innocent activity that somehow deeply irritated him. While you're here enjoying yourself, he started, his speech slightly slurred, I'm out there earning money to support your lazy family. I didn't respond. I'd learned that responding only made things worse. Come here, he said, pointing to the floor in front of him like I was a dog. I got up from the couch and approached. He grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt and dragged me to the balcony of our 10th floor apartment. The night was cold and the city views stretched below us, millions of distant lights. You know what my problem with you is? He asked, his hand still squeezing my wrist. You weaken me. Your presence in my life, your weaknesses, your ingratitude. All of it weakens me. I was too afraid to speak. I've been thinking, he continued, his face very close to mine, that maybe it would be better for everyone if you weren't here anymore. My heart stopped. It literally stopped beating for one entire second. What? I whispered. He turned me to face the abyss. My hand closed around the cold metal railing. Below was certain death, an impact that would undo everything I was. The children would stay with me, he said, his tone almost thoughtful. I'd raise them well. Better than you. And you. Well, it would be a tragedy, of course. A mother who couldn't handle the pressure. Who had mental health problems. Who was depressed. Everyone would agree it made sense. He'd planned it all. He was building the narrative. The story he would tell. He'd spent months telling our friends that I was struggling, that he was worried about me, that I was having trouble being a mother. No one would question if I disappeared. Raphael, please, I began, but he increased the pressure on my wrist. Climb over the railing, he said simply. No, I wasn't going to do that. Even if I died right here and now, I wasn't going to jump. No, I whispered. He pushed me against the railing with force. My body began to tip. The cold air hit my face. I could see everything. Empty streets, dark buildings, the long fall to nowhere. But then Marina called from the bed. Mommy? Daddy. For just 1 second, only 1 second, Raphael's attention divided. His grip loosened. I used every ounce of strength I had in my body to push back with all my force. He wasn't expecting resistance. Raphael lost his balance and almost fell, having to grab the railing to keep from going over. I ran. I ran into the apartment, grabbed Marina from her crib even though she was sleeping, woke Victor by shouting his name, put both children in my bed, and locked the door. My hands shook so badly it took 5 tries to dial 190. The police arrived in 20 minutes. Raphael had had time to compose himself. When they opened our apartment door, he was the picture of concern, the devoted husband with his clearly unstable wife. I told them he'd tried to kill me, that he'd pushed me toward the balcony, that he was planning it. The police looked at me with pity. To them, I was the hysterical woman, the shouting mother, the wife who was obviously having an episode. She doesn't sleep well, Raphael said with perfectly rehearsed sincerity. I've been worried. She says things that don't make sense. She threatened to hurt herself. That's not true. I screamed, but my voice sounded hysterical even to my own ear. He tried to push me. He said he wanted me to disappear. One of the officers suggested I seek professional help. They offered psychiatrist numbers. When they left me alone with the man who just tried to kill me. Raphael just closed the door and went to the bedroom. He slept like an angel. I stayed awake all night on the couch, Marina beside me, Victor sleeping restlessly in my arms, knowing I had to do something. Because now I was absolutely certain Raphael would try again. And next time he'd succeed. I called the helpline again the next day, when Raphael was at work. I need to leave, I said on the phone. And I can't leave my children behind. But he'll take them from me if I try a normal divorce process. He's a lawyer. He already has this whole narrative ready about me being an irresponsible mother. The woman on the other end took a deep breath. There's a friend of mine who helps women in these extreme situations. She's done this before. Disappeared completely. Rebuilt a life. It's risky, it's illegal in certain ways, but it works. Her name was Luciana. We met at a cafe on the opposite side of the city from where we lived, far from anywhere Raphael could track her. She had black hair and eyes that had seen things. When I told her my story, she just nodded. You know for a fact that if your husband discovers your plans before you leave, he'll kill you, right? She asked simply. Yes, I answered because it was true. Then we can't tell anyone. Not your mother, not your friends, not anyone. And you can't take your daughters with you. My world collapsed. What? Sophia, Luciana said gently but with unshakable firmness. If you disappear with the children, he'll search everywhere. The police will be looking for a woman with 2 small girls. He'll make you come back or worse. But if you disappear alone, he can't search for someone who's supposedly dead. But my daughters, I whispered, and tears started falling. They'll stay with your parents. With your family. Safe. And when things calm down, when you rebuild your life somewhere he can't find you, you can start working to bring them to you. Legally this time, because he won't have power over you. Because you'll be alive. I spent the next week in a trance. How do you choose between life and your daughters? How do you choose survival when survival means losing everything that matters to you? But then I remembered that night. Standing at the edge of a 10th floor balcony, knowing with absolute certainty that he would kill me. How do you start? I asked Luciana at the second meeting. With videos, she said. You're going to record messages for Marina and Victor. Explaining why you have to leave. Telling them you love them. Letting them know that none of this is their fault. Recording messages for my children knowing I wouldn't see them for an indefinite time was worse than anything Raphael had ever done to me. Worse. When I turned on the camera on my phone and started speaking, my voice broke. For Marina, who was 7. Marina, princess, you're the strongest and smartest girl I know. You're going to grow up and do incredible things. Mommy needs to leave for a while to stay safe. But you need to know I love you. That every day I'm away, I think about you. And one day, when you're older, you'll understand why I had to leave. For Victor, who was 5. Victor, handsome boy, Mommy loves you so much, so much, so much. You're the sweetest and most generous boy. What's happening is not your fault. None of this is your fault. Sometimes people have to separate to be okay, and then everything is okay. Then a video for both. My loves, you need to know that Mommy is not abandoning you because I don't love you. I'm leaving you because I love you too much to let what's happening continue. One day you'll understand. One day you'll know the truth. And until then, you have Grandma and Grandpa who love you very much. And you have each other. Luciana compiled the videos into an encrypted file while I chose a location to disappear. It had to be a place Raphael knew. A location where it made sense that I'd go. A place with natural dangers that would justify my disappearance. We chose Pedra Grande, a mountain peak 2 hours from the city, famous for being dangerous. Several people had fallen and died there over the years. You're going to tell Raphael you want to spend a weekend alone, Luciana planned. To think. To calm down. To find yourself. Surprisingly, he agreed. Maybe because he thought I was capitulating. That I was accepting my place. Or maybe because it was even easier if I was tired or dead. I took a taxi to the mountain one Saturday morning, carrying only a backpack. I gave the driver a generous tip so he'd remember me. I parked my car on the main trail. Then I did what Luciana had taught me to do. I left my necklace, a gift from Raphael on our first anniversary, on a rock near the edge. I left my favorite scarf. I left a note I wrote with shaking hands, saying vague things about being tired, about not being able to continue, about how it would be better if I wasn't there. Luciana was waiting for me in a parked car 3 kilometers away, on a secondary road with no cameras or witnesses. When I got in her car, I fell apart. My daughters, I repeated, my whole body trembling. My babies, my babies, my babies. Luciana just drove. She didn't say anything. She just let me cry. We drove for hours. Away from the city. Away from everything I knew. When we finally stopped, it was in a small interior town in a different state. The town was named Esperanca, which seemed like a bitter joke from the universe. Luciana had a house there. A safe place. A room for me and a renovated basement where I could stay for a while. When things calm down, she said, you're going to need documents. A new identity. A new name. I have contacts. People who do this. For how long? I asked. How long what? Until I can see them again? Luciana looked at me with compassion. Honestly? I don't know. It could be years. It could be a decade. It depends on how hard he's searching, how much he gives up, how things evolve. That answer was breaking me in ways I couldn't describe. But it was the only honest answer there was. My first weeks in Esperanca were the worst of my life. I slept maybe 2 hours a night. I'd wake up screaming. I ate just enough not to pass out. I thought about Marina and Victor every second of every day, imagining what school class they were in, if they were scared, if they hated me. Luciana was patient. She'd leave tea outside my door. Sometimes on weekends she'd open a door and turn the TV on in the living room so I could hear human voices without being forced to talk. 2 weeks passed before I had the courage to check the news. My face was everywhere. Woman missing at Pedra Grande. Search and rescue had looked for 3 days without finding my body. Raphael had given interviews, photographed holding Marina and Victor, who looked confused and scared. My wife was struggling, he said on television, his voice a perfect mix of concern and grief. She was depressed. I tried to help her, but sometimes people who suffer like that, well, they do tragic things. He transformed my disappearance into a narrative about him, and no one questioned it. Because that's exactly what he'd planned all along. A foundation in my name was created for mental health awareness. Raphael was president. The money? He controlled it. The children? He had custody. And me? I was a ghost. The pain was almost physical. It came in waves, hitting me at the most random moments, while I was doing dishes, while I was trying to sleep, while I was breathing. The longing for my daughters was a living thing that lived in my chest. But I survived. Because if I didn't survive, it would be exactly what he wanted. Luciana got me fake papers. My new name is Helena Costa. According to the documents, I was born in Sao Paulo but lived mostly outside the state. No criminal record because Sofia had died before committing any crime. I got a job at a cafe in town, work that paid in cash with few questions. The cafe owner was a woman named Donna Ruth in her 70s, who had eyes that saw everything but a tongue that didn't comment. She gave me rooms above the cafe in exchange for work. Over time, I started to earn a salary I could save. The first letters I wrote to Marina and Victor the first did in secret, knowing I could never send them. But writing one of those letters was like trying to connect with them through time and space. Marina, sweetheart, today I saw a girl on the street who had your smile. Victor, love, I dreamed you were showing me your dinosaurs. I kept all of them in a locked box that no one should ever find. 1 year passed. Then 2. Then 3. And then, on an ordinary Monday, my world turned upside down again. I was working at the cafe when a man walked in, someone I'd never seen but who looked at me with an intensity that froze my blood. He ordered coffee and sat in a corner, and his eyes didn't leave me. When he left a card. Private investigator, Bruno Silva. My heart didn't stop. Not until I picked up the card with trembling hands and remembered how to breathe. That card burned in my hand for hours. Bruno Silva. Private investigator. A man who'd watched me serve coffee. A man who, very likely, had been hired by Raphael. My first instinct was to run. Again. To take the little I had and disappear. But where? Raphael had found Esperanza. He'd find any place I went. I called Luciana that night from a payphone outside the city. He knows where I am, I said when she answered. Are you sure? A private investigator came to the cafe today. Left his card. Looked at me like he knew exactly who I was. Luciana was silent for a long time. Leave it to me. I'll find out what's happening. In the meantime, you do nothing. You don't leave the cafe. You don't draw attention. Just wait. I spent the next 3 days in contained panic. Every customer who walked in, I wondered if they were another investigator. If Raphael had more than one tracking me. If my time was up. On the morning of the 4th day, Luciana called me. Raphael hired an investigative agency 6 months ago, she said. They've been tracking women who fit your description in a 5-state radius. Bruno is just one of them. He doesn't know for sure that you're Sophia. Not yet, but he's investigating. Then I need to leave here. Wait, said Luciana. I have an idea. But it's risky. Very risky. And you need to be willing to do something you probably don't want to do. What? Tell your story. My first thought was no. Absolutely not. Telling my story meant exposure. It meant my face would be news again. It meant that maybe people would believe me. Or maybe they wouldn't. It meant I'd lose the anonymity I'd carefully built. But it also meant I couldn't be silenced anymore. And it meant there was a chance, a small chance, but a chance, that the truth about Raphael would win out. Let me think, I said. That night, as I closed the cafe, I picked up the box of letters I'd written to Marina and Victor over the years. Dozens of them. Hundreds of pages of love I'd never been able to give. I imagined Marina at 10 years old, reading news about her mother, discovering the truth about her father. I imagined Victor trying to understand why his mother had disappeared. And I thought about what Donna Ruth had said once when we were having tea. Truth can hurt, but lies kill slowly. I called Luciana back. I'm in, I said. The first journalist Luciana contacted was a woman named Beatriz Santos, who worked for a major news network and had done reporting on domestic violence. She had credibility. She had a platform. She had access. We met at a roadside motel, far from Esperanza and far from anywhere Raphael might be looking. I told her everything. About the isolation. About financial control. About the pushes and punches that escalated. About that night on the balcony. About how the police didn't believe me. About how Raphael had carefully built a narrative that I was unstable. Beatriz took notes, asked questions, and there was compassion in her eyes. But there was also a calculating journalist, someone who understood that a story like this was huge. Do you have proof? She asked. I pulled out my phone and played the audio that Luciana had helped me extract, a conversation I'd recorded between Raphael and one of his colleagues years ago, where he talked about how women needed firm control and how he kept his wife in line. It was incriminating, but also just a private conversation. Then I showed her text messages I'd saved, where Raphael threatened me. Photos of my bruise. Documentation from the emergency room where I'd gone once and lied about falling. This isn't enough on its own, Beatriz said cautiously. But combined with your testimony and the videos you made. Videos. The videos I'd recorded for Marina and Victor could be used in a way I'd never intended. Not as private goodbye messages, but as proof of my mental state at the moment I'd disappeared. If you authorize me to use the videos, it changes everything, Beatriz said. Your face will be everywhere. Your story. There's no going back. I closed my eyes. I imagined Marina and Victor seeing these videos on television. Discovering that their mother had been alive the whole time. That I'd disappeared voluntarily. That I'd left them behind. I need to talk to my daughters first, I said. Luciana helped arrange a meeting with a social worker, someone who had experience with cases like this. The social worker, a man named Felipe, listened to my story and then asked the obvious question. What if they blame you for this? They're old enough to have opinions about abandonment. I know, I said, and tears started falling again. But the alternative is for them to grow up not knowing the truth. To grow up believing their mother was too weak or too crazy to stay with them. To grow up being raised by a man who tried to kill me. Felipe offered to mediate a video call with them. He prepared them by saying they had a surprise. He prepared them for news about their mother. When I saw them on the screen, I could barely breathe. Marina was 10 now. She had my face, my hair, but eyes that had seen things no child should see. Victor was 8. He was shy, nervous, clinging to his sister's arm. Hi, was all I could say. Marina knew. Somehow she knew. Her eyes filled with tears. You're alive, she said simply. I confirmed. And I have a very long story to tell you. And I need you to listen until the end before you react. Can you do that? Victor started crying immediately. Marina just squeezed his hand. I told them everything. About Raphael. About that night. About why I had to leave. About how I'd been alive the whole time, thinking about them. Why didn't you come get us? Asked Marina, her voice small. Because your father is very powerful, sweetheart. He has lawyers and money, and people believe everything he says. If I tried to come legally, he would have taken you from me forever. And I'd still be in danger. But now, asked Victor. Now I'm going to tell the truth. Publicly. And that truth will protect you and me. It took 20 minutes to explain everything. When I finished, Marina asked something I didn't expect. Will it be safe? After you tell? I'm not sure, I admitted. But it won't be safe if I don't tell either. And you deserve to know the truth. Marina looked at Victor and then back at me. So tell. Tell everybody. The announcement aired Thursday night. Primetime. The headline was simple. Mother who disappeared 3 years ago is alive, and reveals truth about abusive husband who now leads foundation in her name. Beatriz did a full segment. She played parts of the videos I'd recorded. She interviewed Luciana. She showed hospital documents. She played the audio of Raphael talking about controlling women. And then, courageously, she included a clip of me in the interview, saying, he tried to kill me because he knew I'd leave him if I could. He'd isolated me from my family, controlled my money, convinced me that no one would believe me. And when everything failed, he decided it would be easier if I was dead. The only reason I'm alive is because my daughter called at the right moment. The internet exploded. Within an hour, my face was everywhere. Marina and Victor were probably watching it on television. My mother was watching. The friends Raphael had forbidden me to see were watching. The whole world was watching. The comments were mixed. Some supported me fiercely. Women who'd been through similar situations shared their own stories. Domestic violence organizations signed an open letter of support, but others criticized me violently. Said I'd abandoned my children. That the choice was mine and I should have faced the legal system. That faking death was a crime and I deserved to be punished. They were right, of course. I had committed crimes. But what about justice when the system fails? Raphael responded quickly. He denied everything. Said I was clearly unstable, that this was a psychotic episode, that he was scared for our children's well-being. But the damage was done. Because also included in Beatriz's reporting was the testimony of Lisa, a woman who dated Raphael in college. She told how he'd pushed her during an argument, how he'd stalked her after she broke up with him. And there was Kayla, who'd worked with Raphael. She described how he'd touched her inappropriately, how he tried to kiss her, how HR had ignored the report because Raphael was too valuable. Patterns emerged with harsh clarity. Raphael wasn't just an abuser. He was predatory. And he'd hidden it from everyone with a smile and a good reputation. The police came looking for me 2 days later. I was arrested for insurance fraud because Raphael had collected on a life insurance policy and for filing a false report because police had responded to a call about my death. But this time I had a lawyer. I had Luciana. I had Beatriz. I had public opinion. My lawyer, Dr. Camila Rocha, was sharp as a razor. She negotiated a deal. I'd plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for leniency. No prison time, just probation and community service. The judge, a woman who reminded me of my mother, looked me in the eyes when she pronounced sentence. What you did was illegal, she said. There's no doubt about that. But it's also clear to me that the system failed you fundamentally. When women like you don't have legal options, they do illegal things to survive. I hope your story inspires changes in our laws and processes. I walked out of court with probation and an uncertain future. Raphael, on the other hand, faced much more serious charges. Extortion, misappropriation of foundation funds, assault, because Lisa's and Kayla's accusations had triggered other women to speak up. He was arrested a week later. And then came the part one feared most, custody of the children. Child Protective Services got involved. They had to investigate everything. The situation with Raphael, my disappearance, the children's safety with me. My parents, who'd been taking care of Marina and Victor since I supposedly died, filed motions to be named legal guardians. I also requested shared custody. The hearings were difficult. The social workers asked questions that wounded me. Why did you leave your children? How do you expect them to trust you? What's your plan for addressing the trauma they've experienced? But there was also unexpected support. The children's therapist, who'd been seeing Marina and Victor since my disappearance, testified that the children longed for my connection and that reunification would be extremely beneficial if done gradually and with professional support. And my parents, God bless them, publicly defended me. Our daughter was in immediate danger, my father told the judge. She made an impossible choice. And yes, she made legal mistakes. But who among us wouldn't have done the same if we were in a life-or-death situation? It took 3 months. But in the end, the judge decided Marina and Victor would come live with me, with my parents close by to support the transition. There would be mandatory family therapy. And Raphael would lose all custody permanently. 6 months after my return, my children came to live with me again. When I saw them at my door, Marina with a backpack on her shoulders, Victor clinging to my mother, I almost collapsed. "Hello," I said, kneeling to their level. "Hello, Mommy," replied Marina, and her face crumbled into tears. Victor just ran to me and buried his face in my neck. We stayed like that, the 3 of us hugging on the porch, for a very long time. When we finally went inside, everything was strange and familiar at the same time. The apartment I'd arranged was small, comfortable, safe. It had rooms for them, decorated with colors they liked. Books. Toys. "Want to see your room?" I asked, hopeful. Both went reluctantly. That first night, I slept with them, one on each side. Marina woke me in the middle of the night with nightmares. Victor wet the bed. I got up with him without a word of recrimination, changed his sheets, gave him dry pajamas, and the next morning simply pretended it had never happened. The first months were difficult. Marina was angry with me, rightfully so. She said things that hurt. "You left us. Dad said you didn't love us. Why didn't you come get us?" Each word was a knife. But it was also honest, and honesty was what we'd started to build. When Marina exploded in anger, I took a deep breath and said, "You're right to be angry. I left you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve your trust again." She didn't like that answer. She wanted perfect apologies for me to say everything would be okay. But I'd learned that sometimes the uncomfortable truth was the safest path through suffering. Victor was quieter, but more broken. He had frequent nightmares, regressive behaviors. His therapist explained that he'd formed an attachment to Raphael because Raphael was all he knew during those years, and that he now had confusing attachments about safety and love. "It'll take time," said Dr. Nunez, his therapist. "He needs to learn that people can be trustworthy. And the most important way to learn that is through you, by being consistent, being present, being safe." So that's what I did. Every day I was there. I made his favorite snacks. I helped with homework. I read bedtime stories even when I was exhausted. I attended every one of Victor's soccer games. I went to every art presentation of Marina's. One day, months later, Marina asked me to watch the videos I'd recorded for her. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I want to know what you were thinking when you recorded them." We sat together on the couch and played the file. In it, I was younger, more scared, my face wet with tears. "Marina, princess, you're the strongest and smartest girl I know." She watched in silence. When it ended, she simply rested her head on my shoulder. "I was so angry with you," she said, "because I think somewhere deep inside me I knew you had reasons. But I also hated the reason. Can I do something to help?" I asked. "No. But this helped." She pointed to the computer screen, where my face was still visible. "Seeing you. Knowing you had loved me. That you'd really left because you thought it was the only way to keep me safe. That helps." Over the next year, things started moving toward healing. Marina and Victor still had bad days. They still had nightmares. They still had moments where they wanted to explode in anger. But they also had good days. Days where we played around in the kitchen. Days where I read to them before bed, and they fell asleep listening to my voice. Days where it seemed like maybe, just maybe, we could be a family again. 2 years after my return, I received a letter from the court. Raphael would be released in 6 months with good behavior. 3 years of his 5-year sentence had already passed, and the prison system was overcrowded. He'd be placed on parole, electronic monitoring, proximity restrictions with the children and me. But he'd be released. When I told Marina and Victor, Marina went rigid. Victor started having nightmares again. My mother wanted to go to the parole hearing and object personally. But I needed to think differently. Raphael had spent 3 years in prison. I'd spent 3 years rebuilding my life. And the truth was that I couldn't be afraid of him forever. Neither could we. Not if we wanted to truly heal. I met with Dr. Camila, my lawyer, and with Dr. Nunez, my children's therapist. "There's an opportunity here," I said. One that could be transformative, or it could be a disaster. I want to hear your honest opinions. What's the idea? Asked Camila. I want to confront him at the parole hearing, I said. I want to look him in the eyes in front of the court and speak my truth. Not the truth the media knows. My personal truth. That's extremely risky, said Camila immediately. Emotionally risky. Are you sure you want to do this? No, I admitted. But I also know that if I don't do this, he'll carry power over me for the rest of my life. And my children will too. Dr. Nunez was quiet for a while. If you decide to do this, you need to be absolutely certain you're not doing it for revenge. Because if you are, it will hurt you emotionally as much as it hurts him. I spent the next week thinking about this. I went to the symbolic grave that my body was supposedly occupying, although there was no body there, just a monument Raphael had erected. I sat near it and cried. I cried for the years I lost. For the moments I didn't have with my children. For the nights I spent in fear. But I also cried for the moments I did have. For the hugs. For Marina's laughter. For Victor's drawings hanging on the walls. For the life I'd rebuilt. When I stood up from that grave, metaphorically and literally, I knew I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom. I wanted Raphael to know he hadn't won. That I'd survived. That my children were with me and were strong. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to give him a chance to be better. Not because he deserved it, but because my children deserved a father who wasn't a monster. The parole hearing was scheduled for a sunny Tuesday in March. Marina and Victor didn't go. That would have been too much for them. But my parents were there. Luciano was there. Beatriz was there, covering the story. And Dr. Nunez was sitting in the support gallery. Raphael entered in prison shoes, still wearing the gray uniform of the penitentiary. He'd aged. There was gray hair, and an expression I couldn't quite read. When he saw me, something changed in his face. Recognition? Shock? Guilt? I couldn't tell. The judge posed the question routinely. Raphael would be released under certain conditions. He couldn't approach me or the children. He couldn't contact us directly. He'd have electronic monitoring. He'd need approval to change cities or jobs. And then the judge asked if anyone wanted to speak. I stood up. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Camila turned to look at me, as if she didn't know I intended to speak. Your Honor, I would like to make a statement, I said, my voice clear and firm. Raphael went white. I walked to the front of the court and placed my hand on the stand. I took a deep breath. My name is Sophia. 5 years ago, this man, I pointed at Raphael, tried to kill me. He pushed me toward the edge of a 10th floor balcony because I defied him. Because I wasn't perfect. Because I represented a threat to the control he'd so carefully built over my life. Raphael looked forward at nothing. I escaped because my daughter called at just the right moment. I was lucky. Many women aren't that lucky. I paused, letting that sink in. Because of that night, I left my children. I disappeared. I did things that were illegal, that hurt me, that hurt my children. And all of it because the system failed to protect me. Because the police didn't believe me. Because no one would believe me. But I'm not here to ask this court to keep him locked up. I'm not here for revenge. I saw Raphael lift his eyes, surprised. I'm here to say something very clear. You didn't break me. You didn't break my children. You didn't break my capacity to love, trust, or hope. My voice started to tremble, but I continued. You broke your own chances of being in our lives. You broke the trust of the people who loved you. You built an entire career on a lie, on my supposed body, on my supposed mental illness, on your feigned compassion. And now you're going to walk out of this building, and you're going to try to rebuild something. And I genuinely hope you use this time not to plot against us, but to understand what you did. To be better. Not for us, but for yourself. Because carrying this, I pointed to myself, is a heavy burden. I stopped, breathing deeply. But I also want to be very clear. If you so much as try to contact my children outside the parameters established by this court, if you try any form of manipulation or control, I will be here. My lawyers will be here. And this time, it won't be easy for you to rewrite the story. My voice became almost a whisper. Because this time, the truth is already recorded. In newspapers. In recordings. In books that someone will probably write. You can't rewrite this. I stepped down from the stand and sat down. My heart was racing wildly. But I was calm. I was safe. The judge granted Raphael parole. But there was a different quality to the decision, as if my statement had changed something in the room. The judge spoke very specifically about proximity restrictions. About the consequences if he violated them. When Raphael was removed for release processing, he looked at me one last time. There was no hatred in that look. There was only defeat. Life after Raphael's release was strange in ways I hadn't anticipated. Part of me stayed tense, waiting for him to violate the restriction, for him to come find us, for him to try one last manipulation. But he didn't. Instead, he asked to send letters to Marina and Victor through a mediator. Nothing direct, just words on paper. In his first letter to Marina, he wrote, "Dear Marina, I don't know if you'll read this to the end, or if you'll tear it up the moment you receive it. But I need to try. I need to tell you I'm sorry. For the years of fear. For the anger you feel. For everything I did. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I understand now what I did. And that guilt of it will be with me forever." Marina read the letter and asked me to keep it. She didn't respond. Victor's letter was simpler. "Dear Victor, I'm your father, but I didn't deserve to be. I hope that one day you can be at peace with everything that happened. Not because I say so, but because you manage it. I love you, even though I don't deserve that love." Victor cried when he read it. He didn't respond either. Over time, both decided that eventually, maybe when they were older, they'd like to talk to Raphael. Not because they'd forgiven him, but because they wanted to understand. They wanted to confront. They wanted answers. I told them that would be their decision, and that I'd support whatever choice they made. A year after Raphael's release, I started working with domestic violence victims more formally. I obtained my certification as a domestic violence counselor. I gave lectures in schools about signs of abuse. I wrote a blog about my experience. Slowly, my story transformed into a resource for other women. I received hundreds of messages from women who'd been in similar situations. Some told me my story helped them recognize abuse in their own relationships. Some said it had been so hard to hear they thought there was no way out, but my story showed them there was. A woman named Daniela messaged me one day. "I read your story. I recognized my husband in it. All the things you describe, the isolation, the financial control, the excuses. My God, it's exactly like that. Because of you, I realized I was in danger. I'm leaving today. I have a safe plan. Thank you for being alive. Thank you for telling your story." I cried when I read that message. Then I printed it and taped it beside my bed. 3 years after my return with my children, Marina was applying to universities. She'd become a remarkable young woman, intelligent, creative, resilient. She wanted to study psychology with a specialization in trauma. She wanted to become a therapist. "Because of you," she told me, "and because there are so many other children who went through what I did and don't have anyone to help them." I was so proud I could barely breathe. In her final interview with the university, they asked her about a personal challenge she'd faced. Marina talked about me, about how her mother disappeared when she was 7, how she'd lived those years in confusion and anger, how she'd eventually discovered that her mother had made an impossible sacrifice to survive. "And now," she said in the interview, "I work with my mother to help other children who were separated from their parents because of violence. Because I learned that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is leave to protect the child. And sometimes the most courageous thing a child can do is forgive." She was accepted to all 5 universities she applied to. She chose the best one, the same university where my father had studied. Victor, meanwhile, discovered a passion for cooking. By 15, he was working at a restaurant as a kitchen assistant, and the chef told me he had a special touch with food. "He doesn't just follow recipes," the chef told me. "He understands food emotionally. Every dish he makes has a story." Victor said that cooking was how he processed emotions. While cooking, he could transform anger, sadness, confusion into something beautiful and useful. This was also healing, I understood. Just a different form. 5 years after my return, I received a call from a film producer. He'd heard about my story through Beatriz, who was still in contact with me. He wanted to make a movie. Not a documentary, he explained. A dramatized film. We want it to be seen by millions of people. We want it to inspire change. My first reaction was no. The idea of my life, all those moments of pain and fear, being transformed into entertainment was disturbing. But then I talked to Marina. "I think you should do it," she said. "Because there are teenagers who will watch this film and will recognize the abusive dating relationship they're experiencing. Because there are mothers who will recognize the isolation. Because there are fathers who will better understand the women in their lives." So I agreed. Over the next 2 years, I worked as a consultant on the film. I helped ensure the story was told accurately, that the details of abuse were realistic but not sensationalized, That recovery was shown as the long and hard process it truly was. When the film was finally released, I received an email from Raphael. Yes, Raphael. Through an intermediary, but still. I saw the film, he wrote. And I saw myself in it. The man it portrays, I saw myself. I saw the things I did, the lies I told, the way I manipulated. And it was one of the most difficult experiences I've ever had, because I couldn't escape the truth of my own cruelty. I've decided to seek proper therapy, not the kind I did before. True therapy, facing what I really am and how I hurt people. I don't expect to rebuild anything. But I wanted you to know that this changed me. For the better, I hope. I showed the email to Camila. You can completely ignore it if you want, she said. But I didn't ignore it. Instead, I asked to send a response through the intermediary. I received your message. I don't forgive you. I will never forgive what you did. But I'm grateful that you're doing the work you should have done from the beginning. Your children, even though they're not in your life, deserve to have a father who isn't predatory. I hope it's genuine. I didn't receive another response. And that was okay. 7 years after my return, I was in my office. Yes, I had an office now at an organization for women's rights when Luciana appeared at the door. It had been more than a year since the last time I saw her. She looked different. More relaxed. Lighter. You look well, I said. Because I am, she answered. I decided to stop doing this. Doing what? Helping women. Helping women disappear, she said. I did this for years. Created fake identities, helped with documents, arranged safe houses. And it helped many people. But it also gave me the understanding that there are better paths now. Better resources. Better laws. Because of you and stories like yours, those paths became possible, she said. You spoke. People listened. Change happened. We spent hours together that day, drinking tea and laughing about the things we'd done, the survival jokes we'd shared. I feel like I've lived 3 lives in one, I said. You have, replied Luciana. They were all necessary. 10 years after that night on the balcony. Marina was in her 3rd year of college, already working as a volunteer therapist at a domestic violence center. She'd found a boy named Gabriel who loved her with gentle devotion. There was no control in him. Just pure love. Victor had opened his own food truck at 19, Sophia's Kitchen, named in my honor. People came from all over the city to try his dishes. He'd become a gentle, open, creative man. No trace of fear. And I was in my office with 2 diplomas on the wall, one in psychology, one in social justice, working for an organization that helped women leave abusive relationships. My parents were retired and happy. Dorothy, yes, Dorothy, the woman I'd met in Montana, had moved to be with us. She was like a grandmother to the children. One afternoon, Marina appeared in my office with a book. It was a novel. Her novel. She'd spent the last year writing it, fiction based on our lives, but exploring deeper themes about trauma, redemption, and healing. It's for you, she said. But it's also for the other girls who need to know it's possible to leave. That it's possible to be happy afterward. That their parents' lives don't define theirs. I read some paragraphs. I cried. Because there in fiction was all the truth I'd lived. And it was beautiful. Raphael. He had changed. Or at least, it seemed he had. After the film, after therapy, after realizing what he'd truly done, he'd given up. He stopped fighting. He stopped trying to rewrite his narrative. He moved to a small interior town. Started working as a consultant, helping small businesses. Apparently successful but unnoticed. 8 years after his release, he received a diagnosis of terminal cancer. When I found out, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt sadness. Sadness for the years he'd spent unnoticed. For the life he could have lived if he'd made different choices. Marina asked if I wanted to visit him before he died. Do you want to go? I asked her. I think so, she said. For closure. So he knows I'm not angry. That I'm at peace. We went together. Victor stayed home, he wasn't ready yet, and that was okay. Raphael was in a hospital bed in a palliative care ward. He looked older than he should. The cancer had consumed him in a way that accelerated aging. Marina, he said when he saw us, and his voice was just a whisper. She approached. She didn't touch him, but she didn't pull away either. Hi, Dad, she said. They talked for an hour. He offered true apologies. She didn't accept them, but she didn't reject them either. She just listened. She was just present. When we left, Marina cried in the car. Not from sadness, but from release. There was a weight she'd carried. The unanswered question of why her father tried to destroy her mother, and now she had answers. Not good answers, but answers. And sometimes, that's what we need. Raphael died 3 weeks later. Marina went to the funeral. I didn't. I had peace without being there. 12 years after my return. I was in my apartment. No, in my house, because it was truly mine now, paid for with my own money. Built with my own work. When I received a summons to testify before the legislature about domestic violence law reform, the bill they'd asked me to support was created as a direct result of my story. It included provisions for victims who left abusive relationships through unconventional means, which was a polite way of saying women who disappeared to survive. Basically, it offered amnesty under certain conditions. I testified before a chamber full of legislators. I'm Sophia, I began. And I'm here because there are still thousands of men and women living in situations where the legal system cannot protect them, where abusers have more power, more resources, more credibility than victims. I told my story, legislative version. I spoke about the failure of the police system, about bias in the courts, about how disappearing is often the only option for those who love their children. I'm not here to say that what I did was right, I said clearly. It was illegal. It hurt my children. But I was living or dying, and I chose to live. And then when things changed, I chose to tell the truth. This bill recognizes that reality, that sometimes people make illicit choices because the legal system left them without options. And it offers them a path forward, through rehabilitation, through agreement, through rebuilding, instead of punishment. The bill passed. And when it was signed, the governor had me on stage beside him. 15 years after my return, Marina had graduated college. She had her master's. Now she was a licensed therapist with a practice specializing in women who'd left abusive relationships. Curiously, many of her clients knew her from my story. They'd seen the film. They'd read Victor's book. They wanted to work with Sophia's daughter because they knew she'd understand. Victor had expanded his business to 5 food trucks. He'd become a self-sufficient chef, teaching therapeutic cooking in community centers. Dozens of people had learned that cooking could be meditation, could be healing. And I had written a book. My own book, nonfiction, all truth, about my journey. It had a major publisher. It was on bestseller lists. People from around the world were reading my story. One day, I received a message from a woman named Clarice. It said, "Your story saved me. I was married to an abusive man for 8 years. I read your books and watched your films and realized I wasn't crazy, that he was the problem. I'm leaving today with my 2 children because I knew there was help available, help that didn't exist when you left. Because of you, my children have a living mother. Thank you." That message validated everything. All the pain, all the loss, all the nights I spent wondering if I'd done the right thing. Yes, I'd done the right thing. 20 years after Raphael's attempt, 18 since his actual death, I was sitting with Marina and Victor on a porch, watching the sunset. My hair had turned gray partially. My face had lines I didn't have at 25. But my eyes were clearer. More free. "You know," said Victor, licking ice cream while looking at the sunset, "sometimes I think about what would happen if none of this had happened. If Mom never left. If Dad never tried. What would life be?" I asked. "Unhappy probably," said Marina. "Maybe we'd still be trapped. In fear. Instead," continued Victor, "we have this. A mother who chose us even though it cost her everything. We have stories that help other people. We have meaning." I held both of them in my arms. They were adults now, too old for mother hugs, but also never too old. "You were always the why," I told them. "Even when I left you. You still were afterward. Always. And so my story ends. Or rather, it transforms into something new. Because this isn't a story about a happy ending. It's not a story where everything worked out perfectly and we all lived without pain or scars. This is a story about a woman who was pushed toward an abyss and chose to stand up. It's a story about letting go of what you can't control and fighting for what you can. It's a story about how sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is give up. It's a story about how the life you rebuild after disaster can be more beautiful, more meaningful than the one you had before. Not because the disaster was good, but because surviving it, truly surviving it, requires you to become more authentic, stronger, truer than you've ever been. Raphael is dead now, and I don't spend energy thinking about him. My children are alive, happy, healthy. They're helping other people through their professions. They're living with purpose. And I was dead for a brief moment. But I came back to life. And this life I built through suffering, pain, determination, is exactly the kind of life worth living. Epilogue. 10 years later, Marina gave birth to a daughter. She named her Sophia. When I held her for the first time, I cried. Little Sophia had her mother's eyes, which had my eyes. It was a complete circle. A healing that crossed generations. Victor opened a restaurant, a beautiful place where people came not just to eat, but to heal. He placed a plaque at the entrance, built on resilience. And I'll simply say that I'm happy. In a calm, stable, genuine way. Not perfect, but happy. Because, finally, I understood that happiness isn't the absence of suffering. Happiness is knowing that suffering doesn't win, that you win, that you stood in the abyss and chose to climb back up, and that every hand you extend in the darkness to help another person climb, that is true redemption. If this story touched you in any way, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming injustice. Your comments and support make all the difference for other people who might be going through similar situations. Until the next story.